How do I clear $45,000 in debt when I only make $15 an hour? All right, take a seat, take a deep breath, and let me answer you, because the story I am about to tell you started with that exact same desperate question whispered in a dimly lit kitchen in Austin, Texas, while a 3-month-old baby slept in the next room. The air in Austin during late June does not just heat up, it suffocates. It thickens with unyielding humidity that turns every breath into a chore, baking the asphalt until the highways shimmer like molten glass. Inside a modest single-story starter home on the outskirts of the city, the silence was broken only by the mechanical hum of a refrigerator struggling against the Texas heat and the rhythmic, terrifying ticking of a wall clock. Miranda Vance sat at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of white envelopes stamped with crimson ink. At 31 years old, Miranda was an elite corporate brand manager for a major regional consumer retail enterprise. Her resume was flawless, her aesthetic eye uncanny, and her base salary sat at a comfortable $85,000 a year. To the outside world on social media, Miranda was the embodiment of modern American millennial success. She drove a sleek, late-model sedan, dressed in tailored blazers, and inhabited the fast-paced world of high-end corporate marketing. But spreadsheets do not lie, and right now, her personal balance sheet was bleeding out. Her eyes drifted down to the legal letter resting on top of the pile, a notice of debt collection and pending mortgage foreclosure. Her mind raced through the numbers that defined her current nightmare. A $14,000 medical bill from an emergency C-section 3 months prior, an auto loan balance of $22,000 for her vehicle, thousands in high-interest debt on credit cards charging an exorbitant 24.99% annual percentage rate, and now 3 overdue monthly mortgage payments totaling $10,500, including legal penalty fees. Her total immediate cash deficit to stop the bank from seizing her home was exactly $26,500, and her countdown clock was brutally set to 60 days. 60 days before her bank account was hard frozen, her asset liquidity hit absolute zero, and her home was listed on the public auction block on the courthouse steps. Miranda reached out with a trembling hand and picked up a heavy, steel-framed floral wire cutter resting beside her financial papers. She squeezed the rubberized grip, feeling the cold, uncompromising metal resist her strength before snapping closed with a sharp, metallic click. For 7 years, this tool had been her silent partner. By day, Miranda was a corporate strategist. By night and weekend, she was a freelance floral designer, building custom bridal bouquets, grand table arrangements, and delicate corsages for private events across Austin. This metal cutter had witnessed the silent late-night hours when her corporate salary wasn't quite enough to keep pace with the exploding cost of living in Texas. It had felt the heat of her palms when she was exhausted, and it had caught the stray drops of sweat as she worked past midnight to earn an extra $300 for a weekend wedding. The wire cutter knew the truth that Miranda had tried so hard to hide from herself. Her corporate job was a gilded cage, and her side hustle was the only thing keeping the bars from collapsing inward. She closed her eyes, remembering the phone call from her human resources department just 14 days ago. Miranda had been in the 10th week of her legally protected leave under the Family and Medical Act, cradling her newborn daughter while reviewing brand guidelines on her laptop. She believed FMLA was an ironclad fortress protecting her career while she recovered from major surgery and cared for her child. The human resources representative's voice was smooth, practiced, and entirely devoid of human warmth. Miranda, we deeply appreciate your years of dedication to the brand. However, as part of a sweeping corporate restructuring strategy to optimize operational expenditure in light of persistent inflation, your position as brand manager has been eliminated effective immediately. Because the entire position is being dissolved across the regional division, this action is fully compliant with federal FMLA guidelines. In a single 5-minute phone call, her $85,000 safety net evaporated. Her steady, predictable cash flow vanished. What the corporate world failed to tell young professionals like Miranda is that an employment contract is not an asset. It's a single point of failure liability disguised as security. The mechanical click of her floral cutter echoed again in the quiet room. Her mind spiraled down a dark corridor of worst-case scenarios financially. If she defaulted on this debt, her credit score, which had already plummeted from a pristine 740 down to an abysmal 510, would sink below 500. In the American financial ecosystem, a credit score below 500 is an invisible prison sentence. It means no landlord will approve a lease on a rental apartment, no bank will issue a personal loan, no auto lender will refinance a vehicle. You become financially radioactive for 7 long years, purged from the legitimate economy and forced into predatory subprime traps. Her baby began to cry softly from the crib in the adjacent room. The sound pierced her heart like a physical blade. She walked over, lifted the tiny infant into her arms, and pressed her face against the baby's soft blanket. "I won't let them take our home," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of sheer panic. The next morning, the Austin sun beat down mercilessly as Miranda pulled her sedan into the parking lot of a local community bank in downtown Austin. The interior of her car smelled faintly of stale coffee and crushed eucalyptus leaves from her last floral order. Her vehicle's air conditioning unit was failing, blowing lukewarm air on her face, forcing her to wipe away beads of perspiration before stepping out onto the hot pavement. She clutched a thick yellow folder against her chest. Inside were her bank statements, her termination papers, her medical bills, and her pristine sketchbooks filled with intricate, hand-drawn designs for commercial floral arrangements. Miranda was going to ask for a mortgage loan modification, a temporary forbearance to halt the foreclosure timer. Inside the bank, the air was cool, sterile, and smelled of polished oak and printed paper. Miranda sat across from a young, sharply dressed loan officer who scrolled through his computer monitor with complete detachment. He didn't see the young mother sitting before him, holding back tears of exhaustion. All he saw was data inputs, risk algorithms, and red flags. "Miss Vance," the officer said, his voice flat as he clicked his mouse, "your debt-to-income ratio, or DTI, is completely out of balance. Without your primary corporate salary, your recurring monthly obligations exceed your verified income by over 300%. Your credit score has dropped to 510 due to missed mortgage payments. Under our current underwriting guidelines, you represent a high-risk loan default scenario. We cannot offer a loan modification, nor can we refinance your existing balances. The foreclosure proceedings will continue as scheduled unless the $26,500 cure amount is deposited in full within 46 days. The world seemed to lose its color. Miranda felt the floor beneath her heels tilt. She reached into her bag to retrieve her identification, but her trembling fingers caught the edge of her yellow folder. The folder slipped from her lap, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. Legal papers, medical collection notices, and her personal floral design sketches spilled across the floor, fanning out like a deck of scattered cards. Miranda dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the papers, her eyes brimming with unshed tears of humiliation.
"Let me help you with those," a quiet, deep voice said from above. An older man in a tailored gray suit knelt down beside her. He was 58 years old, with silvering hair, calm blue eyes behind horn-rimmed glasses, and an air of quiet authority that immediately stilled the tension in the room. His name was Edward, a senior wealth management advisor at the bank who was mere months away from retirement. Edward had spent 30 years watching ordinary people navigate the complex, unforgiving machinery of American finance. Edward picked up several pages of Miranda's floral design portfolio. His eyes lingered on the margins of the paper. There, in neat, precise handwriting, Miranda had not only drawn stunning floral arrangements, but she had also drafted detailed financial calculations: unit acquisition cost for raw stem imports, labor hour allocations, wholesale markup percentages, and net profit margin projections for every single bouquet. Edward stopped gathering the papers. He looked down at the mathematical precision on the pages, then looked up at Miranda's distressed face. He saw something that the young loan officer at the desk completely missed. He did not see a desperate debtor destined for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. He saw an elite corporate strategist who possessed master-level supply chain knowledge and high-end brand packaging skills, but who was trapping herself in the low-margin, high-stress cycle of basic physical labor. "You drew these?" Edward asked softly, rising and extending a hand to help Miranda to her feet. "Yes," Miranda stammered, wiping her eyes. It's just my side business. Freelance floral work. It's nothing compared to my corporate career." Edward smiled gently, handing her the stack of paper. "Follow me to my office, Miss Vance. We need to have a conversation that has nothing to do with bank forms." Inside Edward's quiet, wood-paneled office, away from the cold gaze of the teller counters, Edward sat behind his desk and leaned forward. He didn't open a bank loan application. Instead, he pulled out a blank pad of yellow legal paper and a fountain pen. "Miss Vance," Edward began, his voice steady and deeply reflective, "the reason you are in this crisis is not because you lack talent, hard work, or intelligence. You are in this crisis because you succumbed to the modern financial illusion. You believed that a single high-paying corporate salary was safety. You treated your primary job as your sole foundation, and you treated your true skill, your floral design and branding talent, as a mere hobby to pay for groceries." Miranda looked down at her hands, the truth of his words stinging like cold rain. "I thought FMLA would protect me. I thought my salary was secure." "No corporate salary is secure," Edward said calmly. "A salary is simply a temporary payment to buy your time so someone else can build an asset portfolio. When corporate leadership faces inflation or declining margins, you become an expense line item to be deleted. But look at what you hold in your hands." Edward pointed to her sketchbook. "You understand supply chain optimization. You know how to source raw materials at wholesale, negotiate delivery timelines, and package a visual product that commands emotional authority. But instead of building a financial system around this, you are trading your physical hours for pennies by selling one bouquet at a time to retail consumers." Miranda shook her head helplessly. "Mr. Edward, I have 46 days left. The bank wants $26,500. I don't have time to build a massive business. I'm drowning in high-interest debt. My credit score is ruined, and I have zero liquidity." Edward picked up his fountain pen and began drawing a clear three-tiered pyramid on the legal pad. "You do not need a loan, Miranda. A loan would only add more weight to a sinking ship. What you need is a financial transformation strategy, a three-step mechanics of money that converts your immediate active skill into rapid cash flow, restructures your obligations, and ultimately builds an unassailable financial citadel." Edward tapped the top tier of the pyramid. "Step 1 is short-term cash flow optimization. You must immediately stop selling physical labor to individual retail buyers. That model is low margin and unscalable.
Instead, you are going to leverage your corporate brand manager background to package your skills into high-ticket B2B solutions and scalable digital products. You will not sell flowers, you will sell subscription floral branding to corporate offices, boutique hotels, and tech firms in Austin. Simultaneously, you will digitize your floral design methodology into a high-value masterclass and digital templates. You need active cash flow that generates high gross margins with zero physical inventory overhead. Edward tapped the middle tier. Step 2 is budget allocation and strategic debt liquidation. Once that cash begins to flow, you will not spend a single dollar on lifestyle restoration. You will implement a strict cash allocation system. Exactly 50% of your net side hustle revenue will be deployed directly towards your highest interest liabilities and mortgage arrears using the debt avalanche method. 30% will cover absolute survival expenses for you and your child, and 20% will be locked away into an emergency fund in a high-yield savings account. Your goal in this phase is not just to clear the debt, but to aggressively drive down your debt-to-income ratio below 36%. Finally, Edward tapped the bottom tier of the pyramid, the foundation of the pyramid. Step 3 is long-term wealth building and asset protection. Once your DTI is optimized and your credit score recovers above 680, you will take the ultimate offensive move. You will not just save money in cash, where inflation silently eats away your purchasing power. You will utilize government-backed financial leverage, specifically an FHA loan requiring only 3.5% down payment, to acquire a residential multifamily property, a duplex. You will live in one unit and rent out the other. This strategy, known as house hacking, allows your tenant to cover your entire mortgage payment, effectively dropping your housing cost to zero. Edward leaned back, his eyes locked on Miranda with complete conviction. The financial system is cold, Miranda, but it operates on absolute rules. Master the rules, and the system works for you. Ignore the rules, and the system crushes you. The choice is yours. Miranda took the folded paper, placed it inside her bag, and walked out of the bank into the sweltering Austin heat. Miranda drove home with the AC blowing lukewarm air against her neck, the folded paper sitting like a burning ember inside her purse. Yet, as the initial rush of hope faded under the blinding glare of the Texas highway, toxic doubt crept back into her mind. The plan sounded magnificent inside an air-conditioned bank office, but back in her small kitchen, surrounded by overdue notices, it felt like an impossible delusion. She was an unemployed mother with $26,500 in pressing debt, an emergency C-section scar that still throbbed when she lifted heavy objects, and a crying 3-month-old infant. How could someone who couldn't even pay her mortgage acquire a multifamily duplex or invest in physical gold?
She took Edward's handwritten financial blueprint, shoved it deep into the back of her kitchen utensil drawer beneath old dish towels, and tried to solve her crisis the only way she knew. How? The traditional way. For the next 14 days, Miranda spent 16 hours a day frantically applying for corporate employment. She uploaded her polished resume to hundreds of job boards across Austin. She tailored cover letters for senior marketing roles, corporate communications positions, and brand management jobs. But the corporate job market in 2026 was cold, saturated, and indifferent. AI-driven applicant tracking systems filtered out her resume, or recruiters ghosted her after learning she was currently on an employment gap following her maternity leave. On day 20, her aunt called her from Dallas. The conversation was not filled with comfort, but with bitter, unsolicited advice. "Miranda, stop being stubborn,"
her aunt said over the speakerphone while Miranda rocked her baby. Sell the house now before the bank takes it for nothing. Cut your losses, accept a personal bankruptcy filing, and move back into your parents' spare bedroom. A single mother on unemployment has no business trying to keep a house she can't afford. The words cut deep, exposing Miranda's deepest fear, that she was a failure. Desperate to generate quick cash, Miranda decided to sell her floral designs online. But without applying Edward's strategic framework, she made a classic amateur mistake. She took $600 from her remaining $1,200 liquid emergency savings and burned it on generic Facebook and Instagram ads, trying to sell individual $45 flower bouquets to local retail customers. She had no sales funnel, no corporate B2B angle, and no digitized value proposition. The result was catastrophic. The $600 vanished in 4 days into Mark Zuckerberg's advertising ecosystem with zero conversions. Not a single order materialized. Standing in her living room, watching her bank balance drop to a terrifying $600 while the 60-day foreclosure clock ticked to day 22, her mind fractured. The exhaustion, the financial pressure, and the shame boiled over. Lying awake at 2 a.m., hearing the soft rhythmic breathing of her sleeping child, Miranda had a moment of intense internal conflict. Her exhausted mind screamed at her to give up. Just sign the bankruptcy papers. Let the bank take the house. It's over. You're just a failed corporate employee. But then she looked at her daughter's tiny face. She remembered the cold, dismissive tone of the corporate HR representative firing her over the phone while she was recovering from surgery. She remembered the loan officer treating her like a bad statistic. No, her inner voice roared, fueled by a fierce maternal rage. I am a brand manager. I spent 8 years building multi-million-dollar identities for corporate executives who discarded me overnight. If I cannot build a brand to save my own daughter's future, then I deserve to lose everything. She slid out of bed, walked into the dark kitchen, and pulled Edward's folded yellow paper out of the drawer. She unfolded it under the harsh yellow light of the stove hood and read the 3-step formula again, line by line. This time, she didn't read it as a desperate victim. She read it as an elite financial strategist preparing for war. The next morning, Miranda launched Step 1, short-term cash flow optimization, leveraging her corporate skill set to pivot her business model entirely away from low-margin retail. She didn't try to sell individual flowers anymore. Instead, she used her brand management skills to design corporate aesthetic packages, high-ticket monthly subscription floral arrangements aimed at high-end medical clinics, law firms, and boutique tech offices in downtown Austin. She packaged these not as flowers, but as visual brand assets for client retention. She cold-pitched corporate office managers offering a $1,500 a month retainer service that guaranteed fresh, professionally branded floral installations in their reception lobbies every Monday morning. Simultaneously, she spent 3 grueling nights filming a comprehensive, highly technical video masterclass on her iPhone titled The Unconventional Bride: How to Design and Build $10,000 Luxury Wedding Florals for Under $2,500. She created downloadable floral arrangement blueprints, stem count calculators, and wholesale sourcing directories, packaging them into a digital course on Gumroad and Etsy for $199. She was no longer trading physical time for minimum wage. She was monetizing intellectual property with infinite scalability and 95% profit margins. By day 35, her B2B corporate outreach yielded 3 signed monthly office retainers, generating $4,500 in upfront active cash flow. Her digital course began bringing in $300 to $500 a day as budget-conscious brides across Texas discovered her content. Money was finally trickling in, but the dark clouds of her past financial mistakes were still barreling down on her at terminal velocity. Then came day 42, the dark moment that nearly destroyed everything. The early morning opened with a torrential Texas thunderstorm. The rain lashed against her windows like iron filings. As Miranda walked to her mailbox in a raincoat, her heart sank. Inside was a final certified legal notice from the bank's foreclosure attorney. The 30-day grace window had closed. She had exactly 18 days remaining before her house was scheduled for mandatory public auction on the courthouse steps. The bank demanded $26,500 in certified funds. No partial payments would be accepted. Shaking, Miranda walked back into her garage, which she had converted into a temporary cold storage workroom for her floral inventory. She opened the door, expecting the cool blast of her commercial portable refrigeration unit. Instead, she was met with a wall of thick, humid heat and the sickening, sweet smell of rotting vegetation.
Miranda dropped her clipboard. She fell to her knees on the cold concrete garage floor, surrounded by thousands of dollars of rotten stems and pools of stagnant water. The sheer weight of her reality crushed her. The countdown clock was at 18 days. The bank was coming for her house. Her inventory was destroyed. Her bank account was depleted. She was utterly, completely defeated. She covered her face with her hands, her body shaking as she sobbed in the dark, hot garage, crying tears of total helplessness while the rain hammered mercilessly on the metal roof above her. For an hour she stayed on the floor, drowning in despair. But as her tears dried, her analytical corporate mind, trained to audit crises under high pressure, began to reactivate. Miranda stood up, wiped her face, and picked up her flashlight. She walked over to the burned-out refrigeration unit and inspected the electrical panel. She noticed something unusual. The circuit breaker hadn't just tripped. The entire digital display unit on the commercial power supply was melted, fried by a massive, improper voltage spike originating from the main power pole outside her property line. Her mind clicked into gear. As a former brand manager who handled supply chain logistics, Miranda maintained meticulous, military-grade record books. Every single day, she logged temperature readings, power consumption levels, utility voltage input specs, and inventory serial numbers in a leather-bound logbook. She ran inside, grabbed her logbook, her utility service agreement, and her small business liability insurance policy. Upon reading the fine print of her local power utility's commercial service terms, her eye caught an obscure legal clause. The utility provider was contractually obligated to maintain voltage stabilization within a 5% threshold for residential-zoned commercial microbusinesses. Furthermore, her business insurance policy contained an explicit clause covering spoilage of perishable goods due to off-premises utility failure. Miranda didn't cry anymore. She worked. She spent 6 hours drafting a precise, cold, devastating legal demand letter, attaching her meticulously documented logbook logs, photos of the burned-out refrigeration unit, temperature sensor history receipts, and photos of the ruined $2,000 floral inventory. She delivered the document directly to the regional utility company's corporate legal office and her insurance adjuster, demanding an immediate business interruption payout under Texas commercial regulatory codes. Faced with undeniable bulletproof documentation and the threat of an immediate regulatory complaint to the Public Utility Commission of Texas, the insurance carrier and utility provider capitulated within 72 hours. On day 46, an emergency wire transfer hit Miranda's business account, $15,000 in full claim settlement and property damage compensation. And then, the universe delivered the ultimate financial catalyst. A prominent Texas wedding planner with over 500,000 followers on Instagram discovered Miranda's $199 Etsy digital floral course.
Impressed by the masterclass's sheer mathematical beauty and cost-saving efficiency, the influencer posted an unprompted 10-minute review video highlighting Miranda's digital blueprints. Over the next 5 days, Miranda's phone vibrated continuously with notifications. Ding, new sale, $199. Ding, new sale, $199. Ding, new sale, $199. The digital course went viral across the wedding community. In less than 120 hours, Miranda sold 112 digital masterclasses, generating $22,288 in pure, zero-inventory, high-margin active cash flow. Combined with her $15,000 insurance settlement and her corporate floral retainers, Miranda's total liquid cash balance ballooned to $41,788 in less than 2 weeks. On day 52, 8 days before the bank was scheduled to auction her home on the courthouse steps, Miranda walked back into the community bank in downtown Austin. She did not ask to see the junior loan officer. She walked straight past the teller line and knocked gently on Edward's office door. Edward looked up from his desk, adjusting his glasses. Miranda walked in, sat down quietly, and placed a certified cashier's check on his desk. The check was made out to the bank for the exact amount of $26,500. Edward picked up the check, looked at the bold black numbers, and then looked at Miranda. A slow, proud smile spread across the veteran banker's face. "You executed the blueprint," Edward said softly. "I executed the blueprint," Miranda replied, her voice calm, steady, and filled with an iron confidence that hadn't been there 2 months ago. "Pay off the mortgage arrears in full, cancel the foreclosure, and then, Edward, open up a new file. We need to start preparing my DTI ratio for step 3. Over the next 12 months, Miranda Vance executed the remainder of Edward's financial strategy with absolute mathematical discipline. She took 50% of all her ongoing floral profits and systematically eliminated her debt liabilities using the debt avalanche method. First, she wiped out the $14,000 medical bill. Next, she annihilated her $22,000 auto loan. Her credit score, freed from delinquent mortgage marks and high credit utilization, surged from a miserable 510 up to a stellar 715. She maintained a strict budget, allocating 30% of her revenue to lean living expenses and channeling 20% into an emergency fund housed in a yield savings account, building a solid $10,000 liquid safety buffer. Her debt-to-income ratio plummeted from an unborrowable 85% down to a pristine 24%. 1 year after sitting on her garage floor crying over rotten roses, Miranda applied for an FHA loan backed by the government. With her optimized DTI and pristine credit profile, she was approved for a mortgage on a residential duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood just outside Austin. She put down a modest 3.5% down payment from her digital course profits. Miranda moved into Unit A of the duplex and leased Unit B to a reliable corporate tenant for $2,120 a month, an amount that fully covered the monthly mortgage payment, property taxes, and insurance for the entire property. Through the power of house hacking, Miranda's monthly housing cost dropped to exactly $0. Every single dollar that used to go toward paying rent or a mortgage was now free capital. She funneled this excess cash flow systematically into dollar-cost averaging buying, low-cost index funds within a tax-advantaged Roth IRA account. And to protect her growing wealth against persistent lampat, inflation, she allocated a portion of her net profits into purchasing physical gold and bullion, storing the physical assets in a secure deposit box as an unassailable inflation hedge and capital preservation strategy. Her net worth, which had been negative $62,000 during her darkest night, surged past $55,000 in positive equity within 12 months, set on an exponential upward trajectory driven by compound interest and real estate appreciation.